Like, oh, they got by a team. It's like, no, you were the one that instituted the process. Stand up for your own process, you tool. You absolute tool.
And it's all they did this, and do you know what I mean? It's like accusatory in its nature almost, and I've never. Lewis is nothing if not a truth sayer.
Did MBS mean it? Did he do this to get this kind of response? Like, is he actually smarter than all of us, and he's doing this to get great TV? Probably not, but
No, Shez. No, Shez. He is not, for the avoidance of doubt. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Shakedown. With me as always, my brethren, my brothers, my right honourable colleagues, the one that they call Shazinho and the one that they call Baxty. How are we doing, chaps? It doesn't matter how you are doing because there is some F1-age, a lot of it, that we need to talk about. Talk to me about this sabotage stuff before we get onto the Singapore Grand Prix proper. Baxty, I'll come to you first. Sabotage of Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson, Hamilton, all now on the back of Mercedes, the boys and girls at Brackley and Brixworth, giving the chap soft compound tyres at the start of the race despite his protestations.
Incompetence rather than sabotage. And I think what's becoming a theme here is that this incompetence keeps happening. So there's clearly a problem with the process. There's clearly a problem with what they use for data. So for those that may not have seen it, there is a video from a Petronas event that both he and George attended, and the interviewer asked Lewis, they said, look, why were you on used softs at the beginning of the race? And he just said, I don't know, I fought against it, but the team insisted it was the right thing to do. And then, obviously it wasn't. And then George piped up and said, yeah, when I saw that everyone else was using mediums, I knew Lewis was going to be off. And then, Lewis was not happy about this. The way I saw it initially before this video came out was that clearly that the team had pitched some ideas and Lewis had gone, yeah, you know what, let's take the rest, let's go with the softs. But then he's kind of poo-pooed that and said, well, I didn't want to do it. Now, the question is, was it imposed upon him or did he eventually agree to it? Kind of like well, fine, you're giving me no choice, but fine, I'll do it. And they'd kind of maybe said to him they were banking on a safety car, which isn't illogical around Singapore, or they were banking on him using the extra grip that may have been available to him to get past Max, which he did have a look. He had a look at Max at the start, but Max shut the door very quickly. And then after that, there was just no pace. So I put it down to incompetence, and I think there needs to, clearly in the off season there needs to be a review of the processes, because not the first time this year that Mercedes have been caught napping.
I know, and this is my problem with it, Baxter, because as much as I want to counter argue and play devil's advocate, surely Toto, the boy who cried wolf, and Mercedes couldn't be so skullduggerous, could they? Surely not. Now, if you're the prosecution and you are charging Mercedes with sabotage of Sir Lewis Hamilton, now you have an orgy of evidence. It's not just Singapore. It's been happening throughout the season, right? Lewis has complained a gazillion times about how the pace all of a sudden seems to evaporate between free practice and quali, that the tyre temps weren't where they should have been, that somebody turned down the engine. Like, it's just... I mean, it's almost like if you believe Sir Lewis Hamilton to be a sayer of truth, then you're left with no alternative than to side with sabotage, no? True or false, Shez?
I don't know. I still think it's still a bit of a stretch, especially if you're taking some of the quotes that you said before, like the engine being turned down thing. There was zero evidence that actually happened. The tire blanket thing, yeah, okay, fair enough. But then also he turned around and admitted that it had nothing to do with the tire blankets. He just wasn't doing a good enough job in qualifying. And if you're talking about him being a sayer of truth, then which truth are you taking as the absolute? I don't know. I guess this incident in particular, if there was going to be one episode that was going to swing it towards, okay, yeah, he's being sabotaged, this would be it. But I think if you look at how an F1 team decides strategy, it's not one person that goes, right, we're going to do this, and that's it. And I'm sure that in those debriefs, in all those briefing sessions, in other scenarios, there's been other people that have been shot down and had their idea put in the bin. So what I don't know, and I guess this is the question, I don't know what the denominator is. So I don't know how many times Lewis has argued against a particular plan of attack, been told or it's been suggested to him, because those are his words as well. It was suggested to him strongly that we do this. How many times it's been suggested to him that he does something that isn't what he would have thought to do, and it's worked out? Because we wouldn't hear about that. We hear about it when this kind of thing happens. So,
well, to be fair, Shez, and again, I don't want to be part. Listen, I can't sacrifice true value at the altar of partisanship, as much as I love myself some Sir Lewis Hamilton. But throw out there as an example of what you just mentioned, Shez, Sochi 2021, right? Lewis desperately didn't want to come in, and then they overruled him and told him come in, and ultimately he won that race. So sometimes it's not like Mercedes get it wrong every time, or at least historically, but the frequency with which they've been getting it wrong just feels Monaco as an example, when Max Verstappen just pulled off the undercut, and the communication to Lewis that day was just like, well, just as you were, mate, just a standard out lap. No, like, mate, push. There's a chance of, do you know what I mean? There's a chance of getting Max. And by the way, it's Monaco, a track around which there's no overtaking to be done. So it's just like, I don't know. I desperately don't want to believe that Mercedes and Toto Wolff are capable of it. But when you look at it, when you assess it in its full form even, like Ross Brawn in his book talked about how two-faced Toto Wolff can be, right? So this isn't to say that, and as we spoke about in your space the other day, Baxley, there's 100% agency. Like if I'm Toto Wolff and I can select myself an outcome 100% every single day of the week, I will want George Russell to beat Lewis Hamilton this season. Why? Because King George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk, first of his name, is staying on as a Mercedes driver. Why to use the WWE terminology, you've got to drop the belt, mate, if you're leaving. Surely, Baxter, am I barking at the wrong tree here, chap, with all of this?
I mean, I'll repeat what I said to you on Sunday, but I think with Lewis, like, the rules of engagement go out the window. It's like, Lewis can beat George, and it doesn't really matter, because Lewis beating George should happen. And if Lewis goes out on a high, then what a great way to end such a successful partnership that they've had over the last 12 years. The one thing I've always wanted to know from people is, what reason do Mercedes have to sabotage Lewis? Now, the reason you've given is the only logical reason I've heard from anybody. You ask some of the Delulus on Twitter, and they just go like, because Toto hates him for leaving, and it's a stab in the back. It's like, no, like, Toto's a professional at the end of the day. And I think, yes, there is reason to believe that perhaps they would want George to win. Understandable, to kind of show the world, hey, look, we'll be fine without Lewis. Now, in my opinion, the better way to do that is to go and beat Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. That's not going to happen this year. Mercedes are going to be fourth, despite somebody telling me the other day that they could have won the Constructors this year. No, it's so that's the only logical reason that anyone has ever given me. But I still don't see why that would be necessary, in my view. So why would they do it? What other reason do they have for wanting to sabotage him? That's my own.
It's fair. I suppose I would pitch this back at you this way, Baxley. Do they need another reason? Do they need another reason to want to sabotage a Lewis Hamilton if it's just not advantage in a sport where like the story's always told intense, right? And so this wouldn't be the first time that a team sabotaged.
People have pointed to the tyre blank, the tyre temp issues, right? But we've seen other teams have tyre temp issues. Like Charles was complaining just this Grand Prix. And what's George Russell been saying the last few races? That these tyres are a nightmare to get into a window. So I think that's possibly what Lewis was getting at, but people just assumed the worst and decided to amplify that. Whereas actually, the more you learn, you realise actually maybe he's just complaining about the fact that the tyres are crap, and that Pirelli have not done a good enough job in creating a tyre that they can get into a window and keep in a window that allows them to extract maximum performance.
And you know what, Baxter, to that point, if we argue, again, in the name of balance, if we argue the counterpoint to the reasons why it's more than likely that Mercedes haven't been sabotaging Lewis Hamilton, the soft compound tyres would have worked had there been a safety car. And remember, at Jeddah, again, and this is the flip reverse of it, right? Lewis was fuming at the fact that he was on the wrong tyre at Jeddah, not being able to benefit from an early safety car, even like everybody else did. So, of course, if I'm an engineer or strategist, even like Jeddah is front and centre of my memory, right? I don't want Lewis to be able to have to moan at me for exactly the same, because Lewis will be the first one to turn around and go, "Hold on, we didn't even learn from Jeddah. Jeddah weren't that many moons ago." And so, it is teching. James Allison told the reason, right, as to why Lewis's time keeps going away between free practice and qualifying, saying that the symbiosis of these cars and tyres as a combination, to drive them fast, there is lap time in being smooth and not hustling them along. And when Lewis gets into qualifying mode, he's nothing if not a driver that hustles along the car. That's why you see Max Verstappen drop it on pole, Lando too on more than one occasion, say, "Hang on, that was pole." They're surprised, right? Because the speediest ones are the smoothest ones, particularly in this rule and reg spec. Shez, am I talking nonsense, chap?
No. Look, my thing about this is, I take that point, and in that I understand why there might be a reason to go, let's have George win the head-to-head this season. He's already going to win the qualifying head-to-head. But what I don't understand is why we're not just looking at this as being a much simpler thing than what we're trying to make it out to be, which is, one, Lewis is struggling in qualifying. He has admitted to that himself, and it's not just against George, it's this regulation of cars. And there's you can sit there and break down the way that he attacks a corner and gets lap time and understand why this type of car doesn't allow him to do that, and why he's having to redress the way he's driving. I mean, Allison et al. Already talked about that, not more than a few races ago. This is why Lewis is not getting time out of the car in qualifying. And the second thing is, look what's happened to Mercedes since the summer break, right? They came off the back of winning 3 out of 4 races just before the summer break. And now they're back to being behind Ferrari. They qualified way out of position in Singapore and then dropped like a stone. And then they wouldn't have done if Ferrari had qualified as they should have. So there's a certain desperation within both the team from an operational and a strategy point of view that means that they're going to start throwing curveballs out like this. And why they did it to their lead driver on this occasion, I have to say, I don't. That's the only bit this I don't really understand. Like the one bloody day that Lewis Hamilton out qualifies George Russell, and they stick him on a rubbish strategy. I don't really get it, but it doesn't excuse the fact that ultimately that car would have ended up roughly where it ended up because it's just slow. And it has been for like 5 or 6 races now.
It's chaos, mate. It's all a bit chaotic, this is, mate. Sadly, for the F1 community around the world, I don't think we'll ever know, but it saddens me, and it fills me with more than a tad of suspicion when Lewis, normally Mr. PR, who understands the ramifications of the words that are coming out of his mouth, never the one to, or very rarely the one to throw out a cheeky expletive, which we'll come on to very shortly. And now Lewis is like, every time you put a microphone in front of his face, his verbiage is very clear and very concise. And it's all, they did this. And do you know what I mean? It's like accusatory in its nature almost. And I've never... Lewis is nothing if not a truth sayer, but I digress. Go on, and so speaking of expletives, Baxty, what do you make of this Max Verstappen versus the FIA thing? Are you rooting for Max Verstappen, or does he need to behave himself and consider himself what he is to so many millions of F1 fans around the world, a bit of a role model?
I hope that all our regular viewers are sat down for what I'm about to say, but I support Max Verstappen. And now that's going to be clipped and taken out of context and everything else. Like, what, to use one of Cameron's favourite phrases, what are we doing here? Like, I mean, seriously, there are much bigger issues to sort out in Formula One. The driver's swearing is not it. Lest we forget the racial undertones that MBS threw out, when he was describing it. All he had to say was, I don't want the drivers to swear as much on the radio. And then he went and added to it because he just, like, he could step away from putting his foot in it and then still find like an even bigger pile to put it in. The guy's an absolute joke. Let's be clear here. I'm not on their Christmas card list. I don't care. Like, this is just the latest in a long line of MBS schemes that are just pointless. Like the jewelry and the underwear and it's like, you're sweating the small stuff. Like, why are you not backing Andretti's right to be on the grid? Yeah, you folded on that. You're like, oh, they got by a team. It's like, no, you were the one that instituted the process. Stand up for your own process, you tool. You absolute tool. Go and try and sort out the issues. Go and help F1 management in securing the race in Africa and let alone all the other issues going on. It's just, like, seriously, like, Max swears a lot. Great. Big deal. All drivers swear, particularly in the heat of competition. Yeah. And I thought Max's protest was brilliant.
I know.
Just one wording, keeping it silent. I mean, if I was a driver in that situation and they'd ask me, like, let's say I'm where Lewis was, and they say to me, like, oh, I would have just sworn massively. I think it's, and got myself a fine, but I thought the whole thing is just ridiculous. This is not what we care about as fans at all.
It's very tacky, this, Baxton. You put it succinctly. Like, my prevailing sentiment is that to be honest, I wouldn't really mind if you're going to punish Max, but you have your SH1T and your house therefore in order as the regulatory body of Formula One, then that's a different thing. But earlier in this season, I recall Lando Norris full starting, and they couldn't even adjudicate that properly because their transponder was broke. And Checo Perez, like, if we can't get the basics right, then like literally.
And consistent stewarding.
Mate, consistent stewarding. I mean, that's not even that. You know what, bruv? Let me not even go scorched earth because I haven't got the energy today. I don't. I don't understand. I don't understand where this is going. Beyonce to Kelly Rowland every single time on the podium. Like, I've never seen a senior person in charge of instituting processes in a robust nature that's consistent across all related parties, acting in such a juvenile way that undermines the exact thing that he's there to do. It's absolutely ridiculous at this point. And you know what? As much as I'm not a man I don't really like expletives necessarily. When I heard Max Verstappen talking like that, and the fact that he said, you know what, journos, this isn't against you. Let's talk afterwards. This is me versus the FIA. My beef is with them, not you. I think Max Verstappen absolutely I was punching the air and doing one of these. Why? Because the enemy of my enemy is my friends. You know what I mean? Love that. Shez, talk to me.
The whole thing was actually quite fun. I thought, like, in that, yeah, I think the whole swearing thing, even from before the weekend when MBS had that interview with was it with Autosport that he had it, um, and he made that like how can you make something so righteous come out so inappropriate? It's just ridiculous that he's managed to do that. But there you go, he's done it, and he's offended the only person of well, he's not the only person of color, is he? But the only black driver on the grid. Just every single time he manages to do it. There you go, he's done it. But what I found amusing was that it gave rise to an opportunity for Max to do what he did in the press conference, which I thought was just great TV. I loved it, and the fact that like you had deadpan Max trying to be Kimi Raikkonen in the press conference versus Max out in the pen chatting to the media, and like you, I really enjoyed the little sentence he gave to Tom Clarkson where he's like, "This is not aimed at you. It's not about you. I don't want you to get offended by it." I just thought it was just brilliant TV, and part of me kind of goes, "Well, did he mean it? Did MBS mean it? Did he do this to get this kind of response? Like, is he actually smarter than all of us and he's doing this to get great TV? Probably not, but
No, no, Shez. He is not, for the avoidance of doubt. Just to clarify for those on whom sarcasm is lost in translation. No, we can't make mistakes like that, Shez. You know what I mean? We've got to clarify. But go on, let's talk about the race very quickly. Baxty, Lando Norris. How do you characterise his performance, his drive, even at the Singapore Grand Prix?
It was brilliant. I mean, yeah, okay, look, he had a couple of moments where he locked up, but that happens when you're in the lead. Sometimes you have little moments. I mean, Max did a full 360 pirouette in Hungary 2022 and didn't affect him at all. So, yeah, it was a brilliant drive. He put to bed the can't hold on to a lead narrative perfectly. Drove off into the distance and just checked out. See you later. Yeah, we've seen Lewis do it. We've seen Seb do it. We've seen Max do it over the years. Brilliant drive. I couldn't help what happened at the end with Max finishing second and then RB pulling the fastest lap trick with Danny. I don't know how I feel about that, but yeah, no, just a great drive and what he needed, I think, after Baku.
Baxley, one word answer. Better drive, Max's or Lando's? And the reason why I ask you that is because, of course, Max's car, it appears like they worked miracles, but I think the true barometer of that RB20s is Checo Perez, and that Max is still doing, like, he's doing bits, isn't he? So again, I say again to you this, Max, the better drive, Max Verstappen's or Lando Norris's?
Tough question because they're both good. I'd probably say Lando's just because he British bias. I think just because the way he controlled the race, and Max is the kind of driver that when he's on it, he will find a way to stick in your airspace. He was in a different postcode, and as good, it was a great rear guard drive by Max to stop Lando scoring the points he needed to kind of keep the championship more alive than it was. But Red Bull did seem to have turned a corner a little bit this weekend as well. So I think him finishing second wasn't necessarily that much of a surprise to me personally, given what had happened in the practice sessions. But yeah, and it was Max's best drive for a while because I mean he was rank in Baku, absolutely rank.
Shows. Let me pitch the same question at you, bruv. I'm keen to see Max or Lando better drive.
Look, it's tough. Okay, I think for the just to keep this one open, probably Max. But in the words of our host, it is techie. Like, because the problem that they had was they turned up to Singapore with a super soft car, which didn't which robbed them of any downforce. So when they turned up in FP1 and FP2, both Perez and Verstappen had a car they did not like, and then they stiffened the car up for the Saturday, sorry, and that was based on Sebastian Buemi doing a billion laps in the simulator. So maybe he was a real hero of the weekend, and actually was the better driver. I don't know, but what tends to happen is that when the car starts to perform better, Max gets what he wants. He gets that sharp front end that he can live with, starts to pay him back much more than it does Perez. So automatically the gap between the two of them widens. But what I will say is, I think in terms of who this race was most beneficial for, I would say it was Max, because ultimately in Baku, Lando missed a massive opportunity to take a huge dent out of that lead. And in Singapore, where Lando had a car that was a second a lap quicker on the mediums, Max still maximized the number of points that he could possibly get, including, cheekily getting the fastest lap for whatever reason that was. But it, as many people have said in the past, and I will repeat here, you win championships on the days when you're not doing well, not on the days when you can romp off into the distance and have a 30-second lead.
He's maximising, isn't he? It's techie. You know what, Shez, I'd agree with you. Like in the moment, I feel like I was dazzled by the glitz and glam of the Lando Norris drive. The fact that when he was asked to open up the gap to 5 seconds, he did it as if he was in a time machine. It was ridiculous. But again, I think you've got to normalise for the delta that he had by virtue of the car that he was driving. I think Max's drive, the discerning amongst us. Like, you've got to, do you know what I mean? One of those the simph expression where you recognise it, like with the squinted eyebrows. You know what you're looking at there. That the fact that he's managed to hustle along that car, and ultimately achieve what he was looking to achieve from the Grand Prix, which was to optimise for damage limitation. Lest we forget that 52 points is the delta between Messrs Norris and Verstappen.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, as at the 24th of the 9th. And this was the same. It was at the end of the Miami Grand Prix. It was 52 points yet and still, which is bonkers to think. The mind boggles. Yeah, the mind boggles at how many squandered opportunities Lando Norris has.
It's probably worth pointing out though that Max needed that drive as much as Lando did, because Max has also had a couple of not so stellar drives as well. And yeah, you could say that the Red Bull hasn't been the force it has been, but Perez got a decent lick of pace out of it in Baku, didn't he? When Max didn't. So actually, there is an argument to say that both of them needed that performance.
They both needed it for different reasons.
Yeah,
like Lando exercised his demons, whereas Max kind of showed, look, I'm still very good here. I've just had a bad couple of races. So yeah, I mean, I value Lando's more slightly because of what it meant to him and what it meant for him going forward long term. But I'm not dismissing Max's drive. It was a brilliant drive. Like, he deserves all the credit for it, because it was a counterpuncher's drive, keeping himself just that little bit ahead in the championship. Yes, with a major gimme from Daniel Ricciardo at the end.
Go on then, chaps. Let me pitch this at you guys finally, because this is where it gets techie as we round third base. Christian Horner spoke about. He was asked about his driver's lineup. Right, what about Danny Rick? I'd love to get to Danny Rick, but sadly I think we're going to time out. Danny Rick, of course, this apparently, if word on the F1 curb is anything that you want to be invested in, is leaving, or not leaving, but being kicked out of that RB Visa Cash App seat. Asked about his drivers lineup, Christian Horner spoke about there being a very many young hot prospects. And for the first time, George Russell's name came out of his mouth. Baxty, let me pitch the question at you this way. Is that just Christian Horner being Christian Horner? Or is there do we need to take this seriously? Is there a genuine material possibility of George Russell ending up at Red Bull at the end of his contract in 2025?
It wouldn't surprise me if it happened because of the way that Toto has pursued Max. Now, I think there's two things to this. There is Christian Horner going, hey, look, there's a very quick driver available, potentially. We would be stupid not to pursue that option. A la the same logic that we were saying Toto Wolff would have been stupid not to pursue Max. But in the same vein, there's probably also Christian going, hey, you've been trying to seduce my driver all year, so I'm going to try and seduce yours just because, screw you. So there's been mind games going on a little bit. I did find it interesting that Toto said, oh no, we've got him signed up for a long-term deal afterwards. So maybe there's more to his contract. It's like one of these McLaren contracts. We don't actually know when it ends. I don't even think Lando and Oscar know when their contracts end. It's just, we've signed you on a long-term deal. It was a bit skullduggerous from Horner, and I think he potentially deflecting away from the fastest lap situation, but and also deflecting away from the Danny Rick situation as well, which I think has been appallingly handled. So
I know. Bless Danny Rick, aka Honey Badger. Shez, let me pitch the final word at you. Let me give you the final word. But to this question, word on the F1 curb again. Says that Christian Horner fancies himself one Oscar Jack Piastri to replace Maximilian Verstappen if he fancies himself exploring pastures anew. Mention no names, Aston Martin or Mercedes. How realistic is that, Shez? Can you see Oscar Jack Piastri in Red Bull overalls within the next 24 months or now?
I think that so this is where I think the landscape in Formula One is changing and is going to change over the next 24 months, right? Because if you'd asked that question 12 months ago, I think the net beneficiary of that would have been Oscar. But now it's switched, doesn't it? Because Red Bull don't have the technical powerhouses that they did before, all the operational, the strategic powerhouses. Like David Courtney's left today, right? Head of strategy, race strategy at Red Bull today to join Jonathan Wheatley and Adrian Newey out the door. So for me, the question really is going to be, why would Oscar Piastri leave? He's on a trajectory where he's going to be outperforming Lando sooner rather than later, I think, over the next couple of seasons, in a team that has a really solid technical department, is starting to get there on strategy and operations, and where Zach Brown is going to move heaven and earth to keep him in that team. So I think Christian Horner might want him, but I don't think getting him is going to be not going to be to Oscar's benefit. And I think what's the problem that Red Bull have now going into 2026 and beyond is that the pulling power of their team is massively diminished compared to what it was just 12 months ago. So we can talk about Piastri going there or Russell going there, but it's much more now talking about drivers going there and potentially ending up in the midfield than it was 12 months ago.
Oof. You know what makes me think, and you hear something and you're like, hold on, something else makes sense all of a sudden. When you hear all this stuff that McLaren were and have been so hesitant to institute for team orders in favour of Lando Norris over the past couple of races, you're like, hang on. I know people talked about there being some sort of clause in the contract stipulating that Oscar Jack needs to be treated as an equal number one driver. But then when you hear about this stuff that Christian is dead keen to have Oscar replace Max, it's like, okay, so if this is true, it's huge, and all of a sudden all this other background stuff starts to fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. It is techie, mate. keep the news coming.
I've got one name.
Go on.
That all Red Bull fans should keep an eye on, and he's a junior driver, Arvin Lindblad.
Yeah,
keep an eye on him. That kid is very good.
Yeah, Christian cited him, didn't he? I think in his cheeky soliloquy. And speaking of young drivers, Bartoletto, anyone?
Oh, where the heck did he come from?
Mate,
well, he won F3 last year. That's where he came from.
could be problems going forward. All of a sudden, it's weird the way that F1 works, right? We've been begging for young drivers, and now we might get 5 of them. Rookies all starting the grid.
And apparently Colapinto's in line along with Bortoletto and Bottas for the Sauber seat, because he's come in and been brilliant since he came in.
Yeah, but are McLaren going to want to let Bortoletto
No, I was just about to say that's been kiboshed massively. No way, Jose. Because again, they realise that they need to keep themselves something in hand just in case Jack Piastri does what Jack Piastri has done historically. If past his prologue,
Lando could leave.
I think that's more likely.
Lando leaving.
He could go to Red Bull.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't as if they weren't after him before, right?
Yeah.
But he might feel like the tides are turning against him, a la Danny Rick, 2018, 2019.
He's going to find out about 2018, 2019 if Oscar keeps on developing at this rate of liquor. If you extrapolate from what we're seeing in his sophomore season, then it will be chaos.
In the words of the channel's friend Peter Windsor, Oscar Piastri could well be the worst thing that's happened to Lando Norris.
100%. But anyway, you know what, chaps, you've been legends. That has been another episode of the Shakedown Podcast from Shazinho at Shesmed, from Sir Baxty at BaxtyB on the Twitters. I've been your boy, Cameron CC. Now put some respect on his name. Between now and next time, as always, remember to look but never stare.